Hello, viewers and readers of the Erudite Bibliophile with Wanderlust. Today, we are here for a special afternoon chat with an author featured right here previously on the page for her latest release, The Hidden Life of Cecily Larson. Ellen Baker, warm welcome and wishes to Ellen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for those readers and viewers who might not have had a chance to read your book yet, or if they haven't seen it featured in magazines like People and Woman's World, could you give them kind of a brief blurb or what they like to say an elevator pitch of this amazing read?
Yes, of course. And I'll even show you. This is this is it. The Hidden Life of Cecily Larson. So this is the story of Cecily, who is 94 years old at the time the novel opens in 2015. And it's about how her family decides to surprise her with a DNA test. And they know that she was an orphan, but they don't know anything about her past. And as it turns out, she has kept a lot of secrets from them. So it's a story that goes back and forth in time to tell the story of when Cecily was a young girl in the circus. That's something she has not told her family. She was the star of a circus and had a bunch of stuff happen that comes out as a result of the DNA test.
Well, and I know Cecily's your third published novel, but I
Yes.
read that it was quite a different experience for you as opposed to writing your other novels. Like I read that you said it was almost like magic, like Cecily and her story were almost already formed and had already happened and they just flowed through you like you were its messenger and vessel to like put the story on the page. And it
Mhm.
in record time too. So can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, it was amazing. It did kind of feel like that. Like, so previously I'd written two novels that each took about 4 years to write. That's including drafting and editing and everything. And Cecily, I was able to write the draft in about 8 months, and then I ended up having doing some edits on it. But in general, from the time I started it to the time I got a deal to publish it was 2 years. So it was very fast for me. Yeah, and I did feel like it felt like I was kind of recording a story that had already happened, which sounds a little strange maybe, but it just felt like Cecily was very real, her family felt very real to me, and the whole story just felt like I didn't get to make a lot of decisions. It was just like, this is how it was. I got to just write it down.
Yeah, you sometimes hear about authors saying like characters like will speak to them and things like that. And it sounds like kind of that's what was happening in this case.
Yeah, it definitely did feel that way.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the traveling circus aspect of the book. You know, book
Hmm.
readers and viewers tend to love books and films that center around the circus. I mean, look at the popularity of, say, Water for Elephants or The Greatest Showman and like so many more. I feel like they have this kind of nostalgia feel that they bring to us of how they made us feel as kids and kind of like the awe we felt in seeing circus performers like defy gravity and fear and getting to see all these exotic animals like from around the globe. You know, they're this sensory rich environments that are full of intrigue and imagination, like perfect for writers and filmmakers. So I was hoping that maybe you could tell us a little bit about your research into circus bareback riders and like the nomadic lifestyle of circus performers traveling from town to town every day, because we don't really have that kind of circus in the same way anymore, that traditional past format. Like the closest thing we have is kind of like that redesigned Cirque du Soleil. So I didn't know if, through that research you did, if there were any amazing or interesting tidbits that didn't make it into the book that we might want to know about, or like how much was
Sure.
from your own memory and
Yeah, great question. So I did a ton of research into the circus, and I was really looking to make sure that I was getting the details right for the time period which I was writing about, which Cecily enters the circus in 1927, and she's in it until about 1935. So I had a very specific window I was looking at. And interestingly, during this time was when circuses moved from being all on traveling by train, which was something that they had done, I think, certainly from the late 1800s up through the 1920s. And it was becoming very difficult during the Depression for circuses to keep going because of the economic situation. And many of them actually switched during this time over to being transported by truck from town to town. So for my story, I really needed it to happen on the train for a number of reasons, logistically and for what my story was going to contain. So I had to decide like how I was going to make that realistic based on what was going on in the time period. So definitely in the late 1920s, it was very realistic that they would be traveling by train. So I looked into, actually a website called circushistory.org, which will tell you anything you want to know about any circus, like every single little circus that was operating in the United
Wow.
States. They have the schedule of where they were day to day to day, like literally every detail they have
How do
online
they
there.
get that, like, from all those little ones into that detail? Like, who maintains that? Wow.
It's amazing, yeah. But so from that, I was able to study a couple of circuses that were maybe the size of what I was anticipating mine would be. I was imagining mine was a one-ring circus only because like a one-ring circus was enough for me to keep track
Yeah.
of, like to try to keep track of a three-ring circus. So with that, I looked at circuses of similar size and like how far did they travel in a day? And usually they traveled between 40 and 80 miles per day. Usually they did a show in the daytime and a show at night. And then, so I had to look at, what was their day-to-day schedule in terms of where they were every day. And then also like the hours of the day, like what's happening at 10 in the morning, what's happening at noon, what's happening. And for all of my characters, so I have a roustabout who's very important in the story. So he's actually working, setting up the tent and stuff like that. So what time did that happen? It turns out it happened like at 4 in the morning where they'd be out pounding the tent stakes and everything. So he's out doing that at 4 in the morning. My bareback rider, she has a special, she's assigned to her own car, which was very unusual, but I needed it for the story. So she lives in the caboose with her so-called older sister from the act. They pretend to be sisters, and the two of them live in the caboose. So while he's out pounding the tent stakes at 4 in the morning, she's asleep in the caboose because she worked late the night before, and they wrap up the show, the tent comes down, they pack everything onto the train, they get the horses onto the train, they go to sleep, and the train moves them to the next town. So anyway, we had a lot of moving parts and pieces, and the way I decided to resolve the historical detail of the train versus the truck transportation was that the ringmaster who owns the circus, along with another man, he says that he thinks traveling by truck is, I can't remember the words he used, but he doesn't like it. He's just like, it's not the way we do it. It's pathetic. And so he wants to keep the tradition of the circuit or the train alive. So anyway, lots of details about transportation, about equipment, about what sort of animals would be in there, what sort of performers. And then I just had lists and lists of, names and dates and the geography of the train, like who lives where on the train. As I said, Cecily and her sister live in the caboose, and the roustabout lives in a bunk car with 100 other roustabouts. Figuring out the economy of it all as they're trying to make this work during the Depression. So how much does everyone get paid? And then there's a whole thing in the book about how the circus can't afford to pay them. So then they're writing it down in a ledger, like we owe Cecily another $20 for this week of work, because she actually was one of the higher paid people, making $20 a week, whereas a roustabout would make $1 a week. So like figuring out all of that, the economy of it, just mostly circushistory.org. And then I found this wonderful article in the Journal of Transportation Logistics about the circus, because the Ringling Brothers had such a huge operation, and they had it down to a science of moving. I don't remember how many thousands of people they would move per day, but their operation was so big that it literally was thousands of people and hundreds of animals or something like that they would move every day from town to town. So this Journal of Transportation Logistics had like a 40-page article that was written in more modern times about how that was done, because it's still considered one of the great feats of transportation logistics, the way that these circuses would move themselves. And so that was pretty much how I did the research. It was all online. And then I watched a bunch of videos, because what I needed to figure out was like, how would you learn to be a bareback rider? The story is that Cecily gets basically purchased from the orphanage where she's staying, and they have to teach her. She has daredevil tendencies, and she's pretty, so they think she could make a good bareback rider. But I had to figure out how they would actually teach her to do that. And so I watched a lot of videos, and I was able to find a little bit of information about how people learned, but I was not able to find any direct information about a child learning to be a bareback rider. But I quickly realized that Cecily was going to need to have a smaller horse, for example, because like she would not have been able to mount or dismount the big horses that they usually use percherons for bareback riding. So she needed a pony, so I got her a pony. So just every little detail like that, I kind of had to think through, but it was lots of fun to try to put it all together.
Was any of it too from just your own memories and imagination as a child? Like, did you
Um,
circus a lot as a kid, or?
I did not go as a lot at all. I believe I went once, and I barely remember it. So it wasn't anything that I had a lot of memory about. No,
More steeped in the research?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you explained all those details for the readers and viewers, because it adds such authenticity to like historical fiction, but a lot of times
Yeah.
readers may not realize, I mean, just how much goes into all these little details that you're just reading on the page. That's like a little scene. And
Yeah.
like, that's why I included in my post when I reviewed the book, that picture that you have of all your notes of like, on this
Oh, yeah.
in this town, and on this day she's in
Mm-hmm.
this town, on this day she's in this town. It's like, that's why sometimes it can take years to write these historical fiction books, because the amount of research and dedication to detail and things. And it was so fun to also read, like, in the book when you were coming through like the area that I live in, like it was like the towns that were around Indy, and I was like, oh, she's right around,
Yeah.
like kind of the central
Yeah.
US, Midwest. And so yeah, I love that you kind of went through the detail that, a lot of times it feel like maybe sometimes it's all this work that may not, like, it may just look like, not the full impression of it on the page, but if you didn't do all that, it wouldn't have the authenticity, or,
Mm-hmm.
the gravitas that it has, like, but
Yeah.
in the hours that you put in, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that you kind of went through that like that.
Oh, thanks.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I love most about writing historical fiction is the challenge of it.
yeah,
And to me, so first of all, writing a good story that people will enjoy is the first challenge, and writing it well. But the challenge of historical fiction is you have to do all that research. And what I think of it as, like, first the research is in the foreground. When I do my first part of the process is like, okay, what is the story going to be? Because it has to be based on something authentic in my mind. So the research is front and center to begin. But the process of writing the story, the research then has to go to the back. And that's what I think you're saying is, like, it doesn't necessarily all show, and you don't want it to show. You want it to be there as like just the real world that these people are operating within. And so that, I think, is the real challenge, because nobody likes to read a historical fiction book that is kind of like in your face with all these details, like, and let me tell you what I learned about
right.
blah blah blah. Like,
Like,
that's
otherwise
not
I
so fun.
fiction.
Right.
Yeah.
So to actually, do the work of like creating the story around the research that is front and center to begin with, and then bury that research and make it the foundation, rather than
Right.
the what's front and center. And what's really front and center is your characters and your story at that point.
Like, it might take longer because you're having to do all the research, but then it creates the bones of the book. Like, it creates
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
space to then give you the freedom to then explore.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I read somewhere, I love the way you describe stories. You describe them as mosaic and kaleidoscopic, with all their kind of layered and, dynamic connections. And I read about your background, and it seemed like it was very similar in that aspect, that there were all these varied aspects of your past that kind of pieced and quilted together to create this amazing lens with which you create historical fiction, being able to breathe life and illuminate history onto like the modern day page. I read you have 2 degrees, one in psychology, one in American studies. You've got job experience as a living history interpreter on a Tennessee farm, an exhibits curator, an education director at a World War II museum, and an internship at a historical society. So,
Yeah.
can you talk to us about kind of the impact those influences had on how you view stories and your ability as a storyteller to transport the reader?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So yeah, I think so. I started off my working life knowing that I did want to write historical fiction, and so that's why I decided to get a job working as a living history interpreter, because I thought, what better way to bring the past to life than actually live through some of those experiences. So I learned how to build a fire and cook in a wood stove and quilt and various other skills that you learn on the farm, and and with that, I think I was really just setting the groundwork for what's become really important to me in my writing, which is to incorporate all the senses in the reader's experience, so in the character's experience and then the reader's experience. And I think having some of those early experiences of actually doing the tasks and what it feels like under your fingertips and that sort of thing, like you can really begin to bring those things in terms of working as an exhibits curator and a researcher at a World War II museum. I certainly used a lot of those experiences especially in my earlier novels that I wrote, where I did have the opportunity to speak with and interview a lot of people who had lived through experiences that I wanted to write about as a historical novelist. So getting that firsthand information was so valuable. And it really gave me something that comes across, I think, in Cecily, was it gave me an appreciation for life stories, for sitting down with someone who's in their 80s or 90s and saying, who are you and what's important to you, what was important to you, and really being able to look through to see that person in all their incarnations. All of us, whatever age we are a conglomeration of every single age we've ever been. And so to look into the eyes of a man who might have been 85 at the time, and he's looking at you out of the same eyes that were 19 that landed on Iwo Jima,
Right.
like that to me is a very profound experience. And it does take a leap of imagination and a leap of, empathy and intuition, but it also is a window into how to tell someone's story and how to view someone's story. If you see somebody sitting there in front of you as simply an 85-year-old man or woman, that's different than if you see them as all those ages. So I think with Cecily, I was really interested in like the first sort of, I'm a note taker on paper, and I draw things. I draw little pictures. So the first thing I drew was like an art, like Cecily is born,
Right.
Cecily's 95. And what is it that's on every moment? It's all there. It's all included. It's all, so that way I could go back and forth in time. And that's kind of what you were saying about the mosaic or the kaleidoscope, is like each of these moments in time is a piece of the mosaic. So how do you put them together? How is the light going to shine on them, and what's important, and what moments out of a whole life are important enough to bring into the story? What do you highlight? What do you put in the shadow? And what in the end is most important to that person? So so I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think
I love seeing beyond the surface, and also all of those things can drop into too.
yeah, I think it's really, so it's the like we were talking in the last question, the historical research, the story, and then flipping those, and then you put the person on top of that, and how does this full person and their full experience, whatever stage they're at in their life, how do you bring that all into the historical context? To me, that's pretty fun and fascinating to do.
And how all like you said, all their different parts of their past, bring
Mm-hmm.
how they view certain things and made them who they are, and how they react in certain situations, and what the
Yes,
reader brings to their experiences and their
exactly.
background and whatnot. Did you
Yeah.
hold up the book cover again?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say to the viewers and readers, the cover you see there, that brilliant red cover, was not the original cover design. It
Yeah.
changed. And so I was curious, was the previous cover design the original one? Was it what we see on the ARCs, on the advanced reader copies? Was that the original?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It
I wonder when
was.
you said that wasn't original. I was like, I wonder if it's the one that was on the ARCs.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I have that and I could grab it, but I maybe don't need to get up. But yeah, so that was just part of the publication process that was interesting and unexpected. That they created this really beautiful cover for that ended up on the advanced reader copies or the ARCs. And that was what went out to everyone, and I was really excited. I thought it was beautiful,
I love
and
you. Yeah.
yeah, and it showed a bareback rider kind of galloping with her arms outstretched and under this big field of stars, basically, which I love because the book is about dreams and about hope and about thinking of things that are bigger than what your present reality is, and like about connection and there's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I thought it really captured that so well. So then, to my surprise, I think it was maybe like November, and the book was no, it was October. They came to me and said they wanted to change the cover, and I was completely surprised. But they just felt like they had gotten some feedback that it maybe needed to be something different. So I said, okay, so interested to see what they came up with next, and then this is what they came up with.
With your other two books, did the covers on the ARCs change from the final cover, or were they the same?
With my other books, they were the same, so I hadn't
Just
experienced that
flip.
before. Yeah. Although with my first novel, Keeping the House, there was a cover that was on the ARC and the hardcover, and then they did a different cover for the paperback. Yeah.
And then was there ever any talk in like the cover design process of trying to incorporate like a picture or the kind of the poster that was originally on your childhood bedroom wall that kind of inspired part of the story? Or
Yeah, I think they kind of took that as inspiration for the first cover with the bareback rider on the back of the horse. And then after that, no, I think it was just the original inspiration. And then I think they decided they wanted to, like with this cover, it just emphasizes the mystery a little bit more with the curtain, and I think they liked that. So yeah.
is the picture that's on your website of the poster, is that an exact replica of the poster that was on your bedroom wall, or is that not the case?
Um, it actually is the same poster.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's the poster
Yeah.
that example of the circus.
Yeah,
That's your poster.
when I had finished writing this book and I was thinking about all the pieces that had inspired it, I mentioned it to my parents, and they happened to still have that stored away, so they sent it to me, and so I have it now.
And what inspired your dad to have that painted? Was it part of like one of his theater plays, or was it just
Yeah.
fiction, or
Yeah, so he said he actually traced it off of if you look online, you'll see like it's a copy of a poster. And he was doing, he directed plays, so he was, and did the set design, so he was doing this play called Carnival. And I think it was around the time I was born, like, so 1976-ish. And I think yeah, and then so he had those after he had done one of a lion and one of a tiger, which are also very cool. I think my brother has the tiger one.
oh, that's really cool. And
Yeah.
I thought it was so cool that it now look that it's kind of was a inspiration or a little trigger for this book now, however many years
Yeah,
later.
yeah, that was cool.
You
Yeah.
talk a little bit too about the making of the book trailer, because I just thought it was so vivid and absolutely stunning. Like the young actress that plays Cecily, I thought was a perfect fit, so beautiful. And it just kind of had this like cinematic, sweeping, epic nostalgia feel.
Mhm.
If any of the readers or viewers haven't had a chance to see it, go to ellenbakernovels.com and take a peek at it, because it is just gorgeous. So I didn't know if you could talk a little bit more about the book trailer too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So it's a great story because, in fact, so I will say I love the trailer. And it is all AI, and there is no actor.
Whoa!
Yeah,
No way!
yeah, and so it was created by a friend of mine who is a brilliant artist and who had read the book and did this for me and just created what he saw in his mind as the story, and and he has a cinematic mind, and it's, yeah, it's just amazing. And I wrote the text. I think he started writing something and I worked on it. So like the kind of the captions that come to create the story arc within this very short 2-minute trailer, we worked on those together. And then he created all these images, which I think create this sense of mystery and kind of the intrigue and the beauty of it.
So he drew like pictures of like the older Cecily, the younger
Hmm.
Cecily, like
He
fleshing
did all of that.
and
Hmm.
like once he created these standard images, then the AI like put it all together.
Well, no, the AI created the images also, and then, or I think I don't know how it works. I
I
don't
know
have
it's
those
crazy.
skills, but like
Wow.
I think he gives prompts, and then the image gets created, and then he can tweak it with additional prompts, sort of like when you're writing something with
Yeah.
AI. I think it's similar, but I don't know. But some of the, yeah, many of those images of Cecily were just like, yeah, that's exactly what I saw her looking like. And I told him, well, she has a button nose and she has these dark blue eyes and her hair is like this. And then he created it like that. And then
Wow.
he stitched all those images together to create, as you said, that cinematic, sweeping
Yeah.
feel of the story. Yeah.
You need to say his name because we got to
Oh,
throw
yeah.
credit.
So his name is Terrence Sullivan. And
Amazing.
yeah, and you can see his work on TikTok. He's at Papa Terrence.
Oh, okay. Is it, and I assume other social media too. Wow, that's
Yeah, mostly TikTok though.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So
he's brilliant. Yes.
it was gorgeous. So I read too that as a teen, you got to meet the author Frederick Manfred with your dad in South Dakota
Mhm.
and got to see like his studio and his house, and also had this chance for him to read some of the first pages from the very first historical novel that you were writing,
Yeah.
and from which he actually predicted that you would be published by the time you were 30. So I was curious, did that encounter like lead to and inspire you to become this online teacher and mentor and editor that you are now? And how did that encounter influence like what inspiration and advice you give to aspiring authors from that?
Yeah. Well, I think that's another great question. And I mean, one thing that it taught me, that encounter where, I was so young and I was very impressionable, of course, and in awe of this man who had published many, many books and who had this dream writing space. And I think prior to that, I didn't really know that you could make a living as a writer because that was all I'd ever been told kind of by anybody,
Yeah.
yeah, like this is an impractical choice. Like, yeah, you've wanted to be a writer since you were 6, but let's think of a real
Right.
job, like, but to see him doing his life the way he was doing it, I just was so inspired by that. And then the fact that he was so generous with me and read my work, took me seriously, that was such a gift to me. And I do try when I work with clients or students, I do take that into consideration because, everyone starts somewhere. and becoming a writer, it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of time. And none of us, when we start out, we don't know how to do it.
Yep.
Like nobody knows how to do it when you first start. And even now, like I've been doing it for 25 years and I still, starting another book now. And it's like, where do I start? Well, fortunately, I'm going to go use my own course and go through, because I've figured this system out, how to start in a way that's efficient and leaves your inspiration intact. But anyway, we're all starting from somewhere, and I do want to be encouraging to people. I am a big one for pursuing your dreams in life. I think life is, well, like Cecily says, and she's got a pillow on her bed in the book that says, life is too short to blend in.
Love that.
So she has a little bit of that spark in her as well. But I always encourage people to pursue their dreams, and if it's writing, then I want to help them and teach them and encourage them along the way. And I do know what a gift it was for me as well. So yeah.
You might be their first validation like he was to you.
Yeah, and that's really cool to think of that. And I love being that for somebody.
Well, and with kind of the ever changing and constant climate of like online retailers like Amazon, and like the push and
Mm-hmm.
influence of social media, Facebook, Instagram, and just kind of the complex landscape of traditional publishing industry in general, like how has that changed what you teach in your curriculum like over the years, and like what advice you give with all of these changes that have happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still catching up to those things because I am still biased toward traditional publishing. And I know that there are so many people doing great things with indie publishing and self-publishing. I will say the reason I'm biased toward traditional publishing is, number one, I have had such marvelous experiences with it. The people who have worked on my books are amazing. They are so smart. They are so detail oriented. They are so good, and they have the ability to distribute your book to a much wider audience because they have all these systems in place. So I always encourage my students to try to go through the process, try to get an agent. It's hard. Um, I will say I had to, due to some, I had parted company with my previous agent. I needed to get a new agent. I had 75 rejections for Cecily before I got an agent for her.
After you'd already been published twice.
Yes, so it's hard. It takes, but it just takes finding the right match. And then I think from there you have a chance of finding a publisher. Even having an agent, you're not guaranteed to get a publisher. But the reason why I still encourage people to do this is because the fact that a book only benefits from all the eyes that come on it. I was in love with my book when it got sold, and my agent loved it. And I had this amazing editor who went in there and she looked at every line and she made it so much better. So we can always be better. We can always do better. We can always create something even more beautiful if we have the right help. So that's why I still say there is tremendous value in going the route of traditional publishing, even as hard as it is, even as many roadblocks as there are. Now, certain people have different goals. So, some people might just want to get a book into the hands of their friends and family, and that's the most important. Like they've written a book, they've published it, they've gotten it into the hands of people who they want to read it. So if that's your goal, that's great. But for me, I just really encourage my students to, if they want to go the whole route and really be a novelist, like just keep going, keep trying, because you can always, you benefit from it in the end. All the challenges, you benefit.
And then how do you manage the social media aspect? Do you like have to carve out certain time to make sure you're posting a certain amount, or do you get advice from your agent, or how do you feel about the whole social media marketing aspect of everything?
Yeah, that's been something I've been learning along the way too, because to be honest, I didn't do much with social media up until 6 months ago, maybe a little more than that. And I started trying to really ramp up my social media presence. back in 2007, when my first novel was published, I wasn't even on Facebook. So it was a totally different world. And I've had to sort of learn and adjust as we go. Um, I, I do find that it takes quite a bit of time that I wish I could devote to writing. So I'm still trying to balance that out.
Right.
I would say, like, it's important, and also, like, there needs to be a balance there to allow you to create good work.
Right. Well,
Hmm.
and I know you also have a background in being an indie bookstore seller and event
Yeah.
coordinator. So, did
Hmm.
that also arm you with any specific tools that kind of helped with kind of the design and marketing aspects of your books on like how to make them stand out on the shelves or how to sell off the shelves? Or did that inform any decisions on your writing specifically or working with the publishing industry?
I think it certainly gave me a behind the scenes look at how people respond on the other side. So, um, for for example, being published by a traditional publisher and the galley arriving at the store, you get noticed by the booksellers. Whereas it's very hard to get in the door as an indie, because as an indie published author,
Yeah.
at least it was. I mean, again, this is a little bit out of date, so I don't want anyone to take this as like the truth, because it's
Right.
just my experience back in like almost 20 years ago. I was working at the bookstore, but I know we would see so many books that would come in the door. I mean, you've got dozens every day competing for your attention. So if a book has made it through all the gatekeeping of getting an agent, getting a publisher that's a big publisher, if they've made it through all that gatekeeping, you look at it like this is probably going to be a good book, and you're more apt to maybe pick it up if it's something of a subject that interests you. So I think that's also why I tend to lean toward traditional publishing, just because I on that side. But again, I don't know now what booksellers, maybe they're more open-minded than I was at that time. But I do think there is also a recognition of the gatekeeping and the quality control that goes on, but when you do get a good publisher. So, or
And did
I'm sorry, I don't mean to say good publisher, I mean to say one of
right.
the big publishers.
And did that inform like too like well, I don't know if you always have how much input you have in cover design, but did that also help too when you're helping in that cover design process because of what you saw, what viewer like what attracted readers to certain books off the shelf or displays or things like that?
Yeah. Well, I think again there is a quality type of recognition of how the book is actually produced. And one of the things I love about my book, I'll show you, is I don't know if you can see, but it's deckle edge.
I love deckled edge.
Yeah, I love deckle edge too, and that's and beautiful fonts, beautiful paper, beautiful binding with the gold lettering on the spine. So like um, all of these quality pieces to the production of the book do, I think, make a difference in how the book is perceived.
Yeah.
If you think about versus a cover or a jacket that's less good quality, or paper that's less good quality, I think it all makes a difference in the way the book is received.
Yeah, because there's that whole adage of like don't judge a book by its cover, but like there's so like you go to a
Totally.
bookstore and there's so many books everywhere
Yeah.
and I think like different things do draw your eye or catch your eye
Yeah.
or stand out, whatnot. And speaking of that, like with indie bookstores, they're usually famous for having like a staff pick section or
Yes.
having booksellers who can famously like almost like a matchmaker pair readers with the
Mhm.
perfect author or the perfect book based on their likes and their genre
Yeah.
preferences and
Yeah.
whatnot. So, like, if there's like a shelf, I'm picturing a shelf or a tabletop with your picture on it. And of
Hmm.
course, your three published books around it, your debut novel, Keeping the House, and your second novel, I Gave My Heart to Know This. And of course, Cecily, our newest edition.
Yes.
So I'm seeing 4 or 5 books with those. One would be like, what's on your nightstand or desk currently? What are you currently reading? The
Mhm.
second and third book are like, what are your top picks for favorite genres? Like, I know you like to read historical fiction and mystery thriller. And then the fourth would be like, what would you wrap up and cover for everyone's like the new hot trending popular blind date with a book kind of thing?
Okay. Um, all right. Let's see. I'll take those one at a time.
Yeah.
So, first was my
Like what
gen.
you're currently reading, like what's on
Oh,
your nightstand, your desk, like what
okay. All right. So I am currently reading a book that you see everywhere, A Short Walk Through a Wide World. I've just started that one by Douglas Westerbeek, and I'm enjoying that so far. I recommend that just from the little bit I've read so far. And then I am also reading a novel that is my own groundwork for the next novel I want to write, which is an older historical novel called The Fort by Bernard Cornwell, and a couple of other research type books, one another fiction and a nonfiction.
like a job hazard, like some of the books that you're reading are like work type books. Like
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's
it
all.
decreases the amount of probably, like you said, the work balance of like leisurely reading, right?
Yeah, I don't read for leisure very much because every novel I write, or every novel I read, I'm also kind of analyzing and looking to
Right.
see, oh, how did they do this, and
Right.
what works and what doesn't work. It's like,
It's
yeah.
hard to take those author lenses.
Yeah, almost impossible, especially because I also do editing on the side. So, but
Yeah, no room for that.
yeah, but let's see. And then your second part of your
The
question
second
was,
part was if you could put like a top pick for historical fiction and for mystery thriller.
okay, is this from recent or
Can
anytime?
be anything.
Okay, so my favorite historical fiction. That's interesting because a couple of the books, okay, so the three books I always name as my favorite books that I always recommend are Olive Kittredge by Elizabeth Strout,
Mhm.
um, and Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg, and the History of Love by Nicole Krauss. And none of those are specific. They're not really historic.
Right.
They're more like literary, but like spanning people's lives. So
Right.
they do go
Generation.
into the past, and some, with especially Fried Green Tomatoes has the generational piece and the back and forth in time. So those will always be some of my top picks. And then for mystery, I've honestly not been reading a lot of mystery lately, so I don't know that I have a new one, but I do love Brian Freeman as an author. I don't know if folks have read him, but he's written a ton of books. They're very, very good. Um, and then for hot picks, like a blind date with a book.
Yeah, blind date with
So I'm actually like super excited to read the books that were featured at the Indie
yeah.
Luncheon with me. Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, Chanel Cleaton's Biscayne House at Biscayne Bay, and Heather Goodenkoff, Everyone is Watching. I did actually read one of Heather's other books before I went to Indy. That one was called, what was that one called? I can't remember. It was really good though. Heather Goodenkoff, good thriller writer. So,
Yeah. Well, and I read there's some exciting things on the horizon that readers can get excited about from you. You kind of alluded to earlier that you are in the midst of writing another novel about a strong female protagonist with complicated family drama, as well as writing a screenplay, which I can't wait to hear about. And that, and speaking of the book trailer, which I feel like it's probably a great marketing tool for your agent when he or she is approaching movie studios. I heard that your agent has been in talks with some movie studios or film studios about maybe adapting The Hidden Life of Cecily Larson. So what can you update us on all these?
yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking. So, yeah, I do have an agent in Hollywood who is advocating for Cecily. It's a little bit tricky with the kind of the consequences of the writers' strike still at this point. So we'll just wait for news on that. Fingers crossed. Thank you. And then I am wrapping up work on a screenplay with Terrence Sullivan. We have done that together. Yeah. And that one is a Netflix kind of a Hallmark style Christmas movie, which is quite fun.
That's
Um,
like completely, like it's completely original, like
yeah,
not based
yeah,
on anything you've written or anything like
no,
that.
just an original screenplay. Yeah,
And that
yeah,
because it's if it is kind of like a Hallmark romance type thing, you have a female and male perspective in the
yes.
in the screenplay. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that was a really fun project to do, and we have Terrence and I found we see things the same, but also opposite, so we work well together,
And you
and
said
we're
it
able
has
to.
already been accepted with Netflix?
I'm not sure. We got hired by a production company to write it, and the Netflix was interested in the concept, and I think once we get it all the way done, then it'll be brought back to them. So again,
I know,
fingers crossed.
I can't wait. We'll just have
Yeah.
to keep watching your page for any updates.
Yes, absolutely. And then with the new novel, I'm really just getting underway with that because I've been so busy with Cecily and all the travel and all the fun stuff I get to do with that. But that one is I'm working on developing a concept around a woman who's a spy during the Revolutionary War in Maine. So it's pretty fun.
And that sounds like it'll also have a little mystery intrigue in it too then.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and a little romance, and a little, family drama and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
So
Yeah.
like all my signature things.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
is it hard to like you said, you're touring, talking about Cecily, which is something that you worked on technically, like you said, takes years to then get to the
Yeah.
final point, while you're currently working on another novel with new characters and whatnot, trying to balance talking about this thing from years ago while you're working on your how do you create that balance, or how does, like, are you having to refresh your memory on certain parts, or because people are
No, I
asking
think
like that book from
no, I think, it's all me, so it's
yeah.
all kind of like familiar subjects, and I actually love, like, I'll still do I do book club talks on Zoom with book groups about Cecily, and I still occasionally do them about Keeping the House, which people still sometimes pick for their book clubs, and I love that because I love that these characters that I created just out of my own mind, and yes, they seem very real to me, but they get to live their lives out in the world, and so it's fun, and I love to juggle all those different ideas in my mind. It's fun.
And it proves that they're timeless.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the um, amazing things about when you write a story that then goes on to live its own life, and these characters live in other people's minds as much as they began living in yours. It's really the most amazing experience, like to have people react passionately to your characters. Oh, I can't believe she did that,
Right.
or that I hated when that happened to her. I was crying, like when that happens, you know that something really magical has been created and is happening, and it's that exchange, as you said, like the reader brings their own life story and their own perspective to it, and you've created something which then takes on its whole new life. So it's just the most amazing experience, and I love having that opportunity to talk with readers and find out their thoughts, and they seem to want to hear what I have to say, and I'm like, oh, I want to hear what you have
Yeah,
to
you're
say
like
about it.
mine and how to cover and
Yeah, because I want
so
to.
are you still if people go to your ellenbakernovels.com website, are people able still to request to do like virtual book club experiences
Yeah,
regarding Cecily? Okay.
they
I didn't
are,
know
and
because I know you're in the midst of writing the other two things, so I didn't know if that was still.
yeah, no, I still will do those. And I'm also working on getting some book club questions up, which I don't have up for Cecily yet, but we're gonna get those up pretty soon.
Oh,
So
that'll be great. Everybody stay
yeah,
tuned for that.
yeah,
Well, thank
yeah.
you so much, Ellen, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to talk about Cecily, and we will have to stay tuned to ellenbakernovels.com and your social media for any updates on not only the new book, but the screenplay, hopefully Netflix, and the movie adaptation, hopefully Cecily.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, all your time and all your questions. And it was
Yes,
so nice to meet you in Indianapolis. And I'm just so glad we got to connect.
yes, thank you so much, Ellen. Such a pleasure. Everybody stay tuned for Ellen's upcoming developments on her page, and check out Erudite Bibliophile with Wanderlust for the features and reviews on Ellen's Hidden Life of Cecily Larson. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.